My name's Tim Barnard. I run a small practice in southwest London, and we've been dealing with drainage design and residential developments for 20 years. More and more with SuDS, deal with flood risk assessments as well. And in 2013, we were asked if we could become heavily involved in Great Western Park, which is effectively a western extension of Didcot, with 3,300 houses, 3 schools, retail, supermarkets, shops, community centres and various other facilities, which seemed like quite a daunting task. The project got outline planning consent back in 2008, and construction work had been ongoing since 2010, so it had been on site for 3 years by the time we got involved. It was definitely moving full steam ahead with a pickup in the economy. It was planned as a very long-term development, but certainly over the last 5 years the rate of development has accelerated, and more developers have become involved on the different coloured parcels that you see on the plan. So the slide shows an aerial view of Great Western Park in 2012, looking south. And by 2013, the infrastructure roads were all completed across 2/3 of the development. You can see the development split into a northern neighbourhood, a district neighbourhood and a southern neighbourhood, and effectively all the infrastructure roads are in for the district neighbourhood and the northern neighbourhood, and the southern neighbourhood hasn't yet been touched. By that time, around the start of our involvement, around 300 dwellings were already occupied on the site, and the ponds and basins at the bottom were all built. And you can see the new development is all the stuff from the middle left inside the red boundary in the northern neighbourhood. So our first task was to familiarise ourselves with the development as a whole, and to make contact with Gordon and the local district authorities and the Environment Agency to understand everything about the job, and then to move on to what had already been approved and what had been signed off. Effectively, the planning applications were approved on a parcel by parcel basis against an outline permission for the whole development. And the new junction down at the bottom had been all approved, every piece of paperwork finished, T's crossed, I's dotted in 2010. And then it was a race to get the roads in and get the development started, and the approval process fell behind the rate of construction, is a polite way of putting it. So the development's split into 3 catchments, which relate to the neighbourhoods. And the northern neighbourhood drains down a slight slope to the north. The district neighbourhood actually drains south and then turns round, comes back up to the north. And the south goes into ditches down towards the neighbouring village to the south of Didcot. Our brief really in the north was to get retrospective approvals for most of what had been built there, to review everything in the district neighbourhood, noting that the infrastructure roads and the infrastructure drainage was in before any of the detailed designs were done for the district neighbourhood, and then to come up with a design for the southern neighbourhood. By 2013, this slide's the opposite way around to the photograph, so the northern neighbourhood facing north at the top. All of the SuDS features were already built and had been built for 2 to 3 years before our involvement. This slide shows one of the key infrastructure drainage ditches on site in 2014, and you can see that it's really been left with no maintenance. It's silted up to above the level of the crown of the pipe. So one of our first challenges was really to run around the site and look at what was built, and to agree how much maintenance to do to the SuDS features to make them work during construction, and then secondly to look at what we would have to do to get them into an adoptable state. Gordon wasn't prepared to adopt that. So it was all about speccing up maintenance work to the SuDS features, none of which existed. There was a drawing showing the ditch and how to construct the ditch, but no real information on maintenance. So that ditch is literally, it's got about 500 millimetres depth of silt in it. And that leads to the next question, well, how was construction silt and water being dealt with? This slide shows a rainy day in 2014, and the document being worked on site is a code of construction practice of what you would and wouldn't do at construction stage, and it wasn't necessarily site specific, and effectively the contractor was using road sweepers to try and keep the mud off the roads, and a lot of silt was getting into the parts of the infrastructure that were built. And then the situation is complicated because the economy picked up. By this time there are 5 different developers on site, 5 different contractors, all discharging their waters, their construction waters through drains which are built by another contractor for another client. So who is actually responsible for what? And everybody's working to the generic code of construction practice, and in the meantime everything gets silted up. So all of the silt really ends up in the attenuation basin, which becomes a silt detention basin during the construction stage. And from a development point of view, there's quite a cost implication relating to this. Do you control the entry of silts into the drainage system at source, which costs a lot of money? Or do you do what they did, which is just have road sweepers on the road, and you've got road sweepers on the road, that's dealing with it? Or do you end up dealing with the silts downstream, which again has quite significant cost? And by this time everybody is screaming to get things adopted, because there are upwards of 500 or 600 houses occupied on site, and nothing can be adopted in any way, shape or form, because these are the outfalls for the highways, everything else. The district council is not obviously willing to adopt it either. The other aspect was the desk-based retrospective analysis of the whole system, one for the northern neighbourhood, one for the district neighbourhood, and the southern neighbourhood developed from scratch effectively. The thing about Great Western Park, it went through the planning process after the floods in Oxfordshire, and the planning approval effectively required everything to be attenuated twice, so that every parcel needed to be attenuated to a rate of 2 litres per second per hectare, and then the drainage would run through the infrastructure roads and then run into attenuation basins, which were also attenuated to 2 litres per second per hectare, so you had like a double bubble attenuation. So not surprisingly, everything is very robust and works very well. There's no problem with the original design at all. So by this stage we are looking at no real problems in the northern neighbourhood, apart from it's all fallen down in maintenance terms. The district neighbourhood in the middle was all basically designed in the same fashion as the northern neighbourhood, infrastructure drainage to carry drainage from the parcels and on-site attenuation. One of the other issues that arose, the outline planning intrusive investigation wasn't very extensive for such a large development, and it concluded that soakaway drainage would be feasible across the whole site. And in actual fact, for each individual parcel, and there are around 20 different development parcels in the northern and district neighbourhoods, every single intrusive geotechnical investigation showed that soakaway drainage wasn't viable, but the developer had to attenuate to 2 litres per second per hectare. So in the north it led to permeable paved adoptable roads with 1.4 metre deep stone reservoirs underneath, which have a considerable number of problems even today and are still not adopted. And in the northern neighbourhood, a lot of tanks, storm cell tanks, concrete tanks, to keep the water from getting into the system and complying with the requirements. By this stage, given the enormity of the job, we were in regular discussions with both Oxfordshire County Council and South Oxfordshire District Council, and the only real way we started to make progress was to have monthly meetings. So we have effectively a monthly progress meeting to look at retrospective approvals or alterations to the principles of the district neighbourhood drainage, and start looking at the detailed design of the southern drainage. So by 2015, you can see that most of the northern neighbourhood is now built out, everything below the yellow line. And construction work for the northern neighbourhood, which is 1,100 houses, effectively was finished in 2016. And with the completion of the construction work in that area and into that system, the amount of construction stage silt entering the system also drops off dramatically. There's still quite a bit of landscaping work to do around the ponds, which is going to generate some silt and does generate silt. But the problems that existed when we first got involved are all in the past for the northern neighbourhood now. So where are we now? We've got various technical approvals, land drainage consents, all retrospectively for the northern neighbourhood and also the district neighbourhood, and we're desperately trying to get ahead in the southern neighbourhood and get the approvals in place before we build, rather than a few years after it's approaching completion. So the issues that have arisen really because this is a particularly large project, but the SuDS features were all built maybe 2010, 2011, and until 2014 no thought at all was given to any kind of construction maintenance programme to try and keep them in a functioning state. So if we go back to the slide that we took in 2014, one of the things that we did was instigate a maintenance programme for a very large sum of money, which the developer wasn't particularly happy with, but it's something that should have been programmed in from the start. So just switching between these two slides, that's the cleaned out ditch, but it's the cleaned out ditch about 3 months after it was cleaned out, and you can see that there's still an awful lot of silt washing down through the system, and in fact for the majority of the length of the ditch it's beginning to silt up again. And then late last year it's become overgrown and it's looking very unkept, but it is functioning during the construction stage, and that ditch is stopping the silts getting into the basins further down the line. And what we're going to do is offer it for adoption after the construction phase is complete. Dig out all the silts, go through all the catch pits, clean out all the catch pits, and you should have a system which will function. But that's 6 years after it was first built. A similar kind of thing with the outlet ponds. That's the outlet pond in 2014. It was quite soon after we were asked to ask the council to come down and get the pond adopted. And again, to look at the work that needed to be done to all of the SuDS as a whole, the contractors working for the developers will price everything on the drawing, and all the contractors are completely familiar with a drain on a drawing, and they will price building a manhole, putting a pipe in the ground, and then once the pipe's in, job done, everybody's happy, get it cleaned out at the end of the job, and then get it adopted. But with SuDS, you put the same drainage feature on a drawing, i.e. a ditch or a pond, and the contractor builds it, and unless there's a construction methodology and a construction maintenance methodology on the drawings, if it's not on the drawings, it won't get costed. And it tends to be, as Gordon has said, and as was on this job, the approved documents for SuDS maintenance were one line in the landscape management plan saying all SuDS to be maintained in accordance with Syria, blah, 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 which leads to this. So in 2015, a lot of work was done to clean out a lot of silt, replant some of the basins, clean out all the ditches, work through the swales, for a significant six-figure sum, which could have been avoided if a lot of work had been done on controlling silts going in to start with, which would also have cost a significant sum. And then since September 15, there is a maintenance contractor who is being paid again another sum, not insignificant, to make sure that the SuDS features are maintained at a standard that can be offered for adoption. And the stage we're at the moment is in 2017, is that the northern neighbourhood stuff is all now offered for adoption and on maintenance, with the district neighbourhood stuff hopefully to be offered in the next 12 months or so, and the southern neighbourhood under construction. The southern neighbourhood isn't connected in any way to the northern neighbourhood or the district neighbourhood, and is a system that runs through a series of pipes and swales to a series of attenuation basins, and then out to very small ditches. There are no watercourses other than small ditches, so there are two small ditches that are going to take the 1,000 residential units out to the south. And again, the attenuation rate agreed is 2 litres per second per hectare, so the basins are very large. And also they are incredibly shallow because this site is particularly flat and doesn't drain too well. So the basins need to be shallow to stay above the outfall levels for the ditches, and also to avoid the groundwater. That's not groundwater, that's puddling after the wet weather in January 2014. So a lot of lessons were learned by looking at what had been built and not maintained at the start of the job. And for the southern neighbourhood, one of the things that was done is there was a proper construction management plan with drawings, cross sections and such like. And one of the first things to do was to put a runoff bund around the site. This site is slightly higher than the adjoining residential development, and we didn't want water flooding into the next properties from a heavy storm having stripped lots of topsoil. And one of the other features of the management plan, construction management plan in the south, you can actually see the houses being built, all the houses that you can see on the horizon, they're all in the southern neighbourhood under construction at the moment, and there's probably about 250 houses built in the southern neighbourhood now. But the basins haven't been built. We've got a big excavated area which will be the basin, which is a catchment area in case there is an incident, and there are silts that collect in there, but they can all be cleaned out before you put the basin together and finish the basin much closer to the end of the construction period rather than at the beginning of the construction period. So I mean, in summary, for this particular project, the key thing has been to work with the local authorities, and also to realise that when this project concept was developed, it was pretty much intended to have the SuDS adopting bodies in place, and everything in the north was worked and geared towards SuDS features that would be adopted by the SAB, which would be Oxfordshire County Council. And by the time the northern neighbourhood was actually getting built, that was no longer the case, which left a big question mark over who's going to adopt what. And there are arguments, not necessarily discussions going on about who's going to adopt what at the moment. But once the bottom pond is adopted, that is the outfall for the county highway. It's the outfall for the private drainage and everything. And as soon as that is adopted, then that opens up the path for adoption for every other element on the job. But I think good communication is one of the key things. But trying to make sure that the SuDS maintenance plan has a construction maintenance plan and a future maintenance plan, and it's proven just by what's happened on this site that it's invaluable to actually develop a site-specific management plan and not just think of it as an afterthought and, well, we can get planning by saying we'll do everything in accordance with Syria, and then that's all that ends up going on job, and the contractor won't price a proper job, and the developer won't price a proper job in terms of maintenance, and SuDS involves a lot of maintenance costs, both construction and future maintenance. And it really is a case of getting the money in the budget and identifying that SuDS, with all their benefits, do cost more money than digging a trench, constructing a traditional drain pipe, job done, and everybody walks away, everybody knows how much it's going to cost per linear metre. We know how much it's going to cost per linear metre to construct a ditch, but you also need to know how much it's going to cost per year to maintain that ditch, and then make sure that it's ready for adoption later on, and it just doesn't go to sort of stage of being silted up. And I suppose the last thing to say is, well, we did look at all kinds of ways of trying to prevent the silt getting onto the site, do a proper job with wheel washes on every parcel, make sure there are proper stone areas for vehicles to come in and out, and that there was a reluctance to implement that kind of thing on the job because it costs too much. It costs the wheel washes and everything, but at the end of the day I think we probably spent more money reconstructing the SuDS features than it would probably have cost to put a proper construction management plan together and then police it, make sure that it actually occurs on site. So from our perspective in this room, it's all about making sure that that element of the SuDS design, and it is an element of the SuDS design, the maintenance plan is not just a throwaway statement, it is a series of drawings and something that a contractor can price and that a developer can understand is going to have a cost against it.